For privacy reasons, names and places have been changed. This story is inspired by true events.
On Saturday, June 18, 1994, 8-year-old Michael Thompson vanished during his elaborate birthday party at Riverside Park in Portland, Oregon. The bright boy with strawberry blonde hair and a gap-toothed smile disappeared while 23 classmates and their parents celebrated around him, vanishing sometime after a magic show ended at 3:15 p.m. Despite extensive searches involving multiple agencies and hundreds of volunteers, no trace of Michael was ever found. 3 years later, freelance photographer David Martinez spotted something extraordinary while reviewing family photos: a boy's face in the background that would crack open one of the Pacific Northwest's most disturbing serial abduction cases. Saturday, June 18, 1994, was supposed to be the happiest day of 8-year-old Michael Thompson's life. His parents, Robert and Susan Thompson, had planned an elaborate birthday celebration at Riverside Park in Portland, Oregon, complete with a bounce house, face painting, and a magician. 23 children from Michael's second-grade class at Woodstock Elementary School were expected to attend the outdoor party. Michael Thompson was a bright, energetic child who stood 4 feet 2 inches tall and weighed 58 pounds. He had distinctive strawberry blonde hair that his mother kept slightly longer than typical for boys his age, and a gap between his front teeth that made his smile immediately recognizable. That morning, he wore his favorite outfit: a red Pokémon t-shirt, blue jeans, and light-up sneakers that flashed with each step. The Thompson family lived in a modest 2-story house in the Woodstock neighborhood of southeast Portland. Robert worked as a mechanic at a local auto repair shop, while Susan was employed part-time as a dental hygienist. They had been saving for months to afford Michael's party, wanting to give their only child a celebration he would remember forever. Chapter 1: The Birthday That Ended in Nightmare. Riverside Park, located along the Willamette River, was a popular venue for children's parties due to its large picnic areas, playground equipment, and scenic views. The Thompsons had reserved Picnic Area C, a space that could accommodate large groups and was positioned away from the main walking paths, providing a sense of privacy for the celebration. The party began at 1 p.m. with the arrival of the first guests. Susan Thompson had prepared detailed schedules and had assigned specific responsibilities to the parent volunteers who had agreed to help supervise the children. Robert was in charge of organizing games and activities, while Susan managed food service and coordinated with the hired entertainers. By 1:30 p.m., 19 children had arrived, along with 12 parents who had chosen to stay and help with supervision. The atmosphere was festive, with children running between the bounce house and the playground equipment. Michael was clearly enjoying being the center of attention, enthusiastically greeting each new arrival and showing off the various party attractions. The scheduled entertainment began at 2 p.m. with a face painting session conducted by Jennifer Martinez, a local artist who frequently worked children's parties. Martinez had set up her station at a picnic table near the edge of the reserved area, where she had good lighting and easy access to water for cleaning brushes. Michael was among the first children to request face painting, choosing a design that made him look like a tiger. At 2:30 p.m., the magician, David Sterling, began his performance. Sterling was a professional entertainer who had been working children's parties in the Portland area for over 15 years. He performed his show from a small portable stage that had been set up in the center of the picnic area, allowing all the children to gather around and watch his tricks. Michael was fascinated by the magic show and had positioned himself in the front row of the audience. Several parents later recalled seeing him laughing and participating enthusiastically in the performance. Sterling's show included audience participation segments, and Michael was called up to assist with 2 different tricks during the 45-minute performance. The magic show concluded at 3:15 p.m., and the children were directed to the picnic tables for birthday cake and ice cream. Susan Thompson had ordered a custom cake from a local bakery featuring Michael's favorite cartoon characters. The cake cutting ceremony was scheduled for 3:30 p.m., followed by the opening of presents. However, when Susan called for all the children to gather for the cake ceremony, Michael was nowhere to be found. Initially, his parents assumed he had wandered to the playground or was using the park's restroom facilities. Robert Thompson began a casual search of the immediate area while Susan continued with the cake preparations. When Michael had not appeared after 10 minutes, the search became more systematic. The parent volunteers divided into teams to check different areas of the park, including the playground, restroom facilities, and the walking paths along the river. The search expanded to include areas beyond the immediate picnic site, covering approximately 2 acres of parkland. Jennifer Martinez, the face painter, reported that she had last seen Michael around 3:20 p.m., shortly after the magic show ended. He had been walking toward the restroom facilities, which were located approximately 100 yards from the picnic area. However, park employees confirmed that the restrooms had been checked multiple times and Michael was not found there. David Sterling, the magician, was packing his equipment when the search began. He told investigators that Michael had seemed happy and excited during the performance, and that nothing had appeared unusual about his behavior. Sterling had not noticed Michael leaving the audience area or interacting with any unfamiliar adults. At 4 p.m., after 30 minutes of searching without success, Robert Thompson called 911 to report his son missing. The Portland Police Bureau's initial response was swift, with the first patrol officers arriving at Riverside Park at 4:08 p.m. Officer Patricia Walsh took the initial report and immediately requested additional units to assist with the search. The initial police response included a systematic search of the entire park and interviews with all the party guests and their parents. The park covered 26 acres and included wooded areas, open fields, and access to the Willamette River. The complexity of the terrain meant that a thorough search would require significant resources and coordination. Detective James Morrison, a 12-year veteran of the Portland Police Bureau with extensive experience in missing persons cases, arrived at the park at 4:45 p.m. His initial assessment identified several concerning factors: Michael's young age, the public nature of the location, and the presence of multiple access points that would allow someone to leave the park undetected. The search was organized into concentric circles radiating outward from the picnic area. The first circle, with a radius of 200 yards, included the immediate party area and was searched by police officers and volunteers. The second circle extended to 500 yards and included most of the park's recreational areas. The third circle covered a half-mile radius and included residential neighborhoods adjacent to the park. The party guests and their families were interviewed individually to determine if anyone had seen Michael leaving the picnic area or had noticed any unusual activity during the celebration. Most of the children were too young to provide detailed information, but several parents reported seeing unfamiliar adults in the park during the afternoon. Linda Rodriguez, the mother of one of Michael's classmates, reported seeing a man in his 30s or 40s watching the children's activities from a distance. She described the man as tall and thin, wearing a dark baseball cap and sunglasses. However, her description was general enough that it could have applied to many individuals who might have been in the park that day. Another parent, Mark Stevens, reported that he had noticed a woman with a camera taking photographs near the playground equipment around 3 p.m. The woman had not appeared to be associated with any of the families at the party, and Stevens had assumed she was a tourist or casual park visitor. However, he could not provide a detailed description of the woman or her camera equipment. The Portland Police Bureau's K-9 unit arrived at 5:30 p.m. to assist with the search. The dogs were given Michael's scent from clothing items provided by his parents and were deployed to track his movements within the park. The dogs followed a trail from the picnic area toward the restroom facilities, consistent with Jennifer Martinez's last sighting of Michael. However, the scent trail ended abruptly in the parking lot adjacent to the restrooms. The K-9 handlers interpreted this as evidence that Michael had likely been placed in a vehicle at that location. This finding shifted the investigation's focus from a search and rescue operation to a potential abduction case. The realization that Michael had likely been taken from the park prompted Detective Morrison to request additional resources from the FBI's Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team. The team, based in Seattle, would provide specialized expertise and resources for investigating cases involving missing children. As darkness fell on June 18th, the active search of Riverside Park was suspended until morning. However, the investigation was just beginning, and law enforcement agencies throughout Oregon and Washington were alerted to be on the lookout for Michael Thompson. The birthday celebration that had begun with such joy and anticipation had transformed into every parent's worst nightmare. The Thompson family spent that first night in a local hotel, unable to return to their home where Michael's presents still sat unopened and his birthday cake remained uneaten. The investigation would continue around the clock, but the trail was already growing cold in the first crucial hours after Michael's disappearance. Chapter 2. The investigation unfolds. Sunday, June 19, 1994, began with an expanded search effort involving over 100 law enforcement officers, volunteers, and search and rescue personnel. The Portland Police Bureau had established a command center at Riverside Park, coordinating with the FBI, Oregon State Police, and multiple local agencies in the most comprehensive missing child investigation in Portland's recent history. Detective Morrison had worked through the night, analyzing the initial evidence and witness statements. The abrupt end of the K9 scent trail in the parking lot strongly suggested that Michael had been taken from the park in a vehicle. This theory was supported by the fact that no trace of the boy had been found despite an exhaustive search of the park grounds and surrounding areas. The investigation focused on identifying vehicles that had been in the park during the critical time period between 3:15 p.m. and 4 p.m. on June 18. Park records showed that approximately 200 vehicles had been parked in the various lots throughout the afternoon, but most visitors had left before Michael's disappearance was discovered. The FBI's Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team, led by Special Agent Sarah Chen, arrived in Portland at 6 a.m. on June 19. Agent Chen brought with her a team of specialists trained in child psychology, forensic analysis, and behavioral profiling. Her first priority was to establish a detailed timeline of Michael's movements and to identify potential suspects. The team conducted extensive interviews with all the party attendees, focusing on any adults who had interacted with Michael or had been observed behaving unusually. The interviews revealed that Michael was a trusting, outgoing child who would likely have approached strangers if they had appeared friendly or had offered something interesting. Susan Thompson provided investigators with a detailed list of Michael's clothing, physical characteristics, and personal habits. She emphasized that Michael was afraid of water and would not have approached the river on his own. He was also afraid of loud noises and would have been unlikely to wander away from the familiar sounds and activities of the birthday party. The investigation expanded to include a comprehensive background check of David Sterling, the magician who had been performing when Michael disappeared. Sterling had been working children's parties for 15 years and had never been the subject of complaints or investigations. However, his position at the party and his interaction with Michael made him a person of interest. Sterling voluntarily submitted to a polygraph examination on June 20th and provided detailed information about his schedule, equipment, and interactions with the children at the party. The polygraph results indicated that he was being truthful when he denied any involvement in Michael's disappearance. Additionally, multiple witnesses could account for Sterling's whereabouts throughout the critical time period. Jennifer Martinez, the face painter, was also interviewed extensively about her observations during the party. She confirmed that Michael had been excited and happy during their interaction, and that he had not mentioned any plans to leave the party area. Martinez had been focused on her work and had not noticed any unusual adult behavior near the children. The investigation revealed that several registered sex offenders lived within a 10-mile radius of Riverside Park. Detective Morrison and Agent Chen prioritized these individuals for immediate interviews and background investigations. Each offender was required to provide an alibi for June 18th and to submit to questioning about their activities. One individual, 34-year-old Gregory Walsh, drew particular attention due to his proximity to the park and his history of offenses involving children. Walsh lived in an apartment complex approximately 2 miles from Riverside Park and had been convicted of child molestation in 1989. He was currently on probation and was required to register his whereabouts with local authorities. The interview with Walsh on June 21st revealed that he claimed to have been at work during the time of Michael's disappearance. Walsh was employed as a janitor at a commercial office building and worked weekend shifts. However, when investigators contacted his supervisor, they learned that Walsh had called in sick on June 18th, providing no explanation for his absence. Walsh's apartment was searched with a warrant on June 22nd. The search revealed no evidence of Michael's presence, but investigators found several items that raised concerns. Walsh possessed numerous photographs of children, including some that appeared to have been taken at public parks and playgrounds. However, the photographs did not include any images of Michael Thompson. Despite the suspicious circumstances surrounding Walsh, investigators could not establish a direct connection between him and Michael's disappearance. Walsh eventually provided an alibi that was verified by a neighbor who had seen him at his apartment complex during the afternoon of June 18th. The investigation into Walsh continued, but he was not charged in connection with Michael's case. The search for Michael expanded beyond the immediate Portland area. The FBI issued a nationwide alert, and Michael's photograph and description were distributed to law enforcement agencies across the country. The case received significant media attention, with local television stations and newspapers providing daily coverage of the investigation. The Thompson family held their first press conference on June 23, 5 days after Michael's disappearance. Robert and Susan Thompson made an emotional appeal for their son's safe return, while Detective Morrison provided an update on the investigation's progress. The press conference was covered by national media outlets and generated hundreds of tips from the public. However, most of the tips proved to be false leads or cases of mistaken identity. The investigation team had to carefully evaluate each report, often requiring follow-up investigations in distant locations. The volume of tips was overwhelming, requiring additional personnel to manage the influx of information. One promising lead came from a truck driver who reported seeing a boy matching Michael's description at a rest stop near Salem, Oregon, approximately 50 miles south of Portland. The driver, William Martinez, claimed that he had seen the boy with a woman who appeared to be agitated and was speaking harshly to the child. However, when investigators reviewed security camera footage from the rest stop, they found no evidence to support Martinez's claims. Another lead came from a convenience store clerk in Vancouver, Washington, who reported that a man and a young boy had purchased snacks and drinks from her store on the evening of June 18. The clerk, Patricia Johnson, believed the boy matched Michael's description and noted that he had seemed unusually quiet and withdrawn. However, the store's security cameras were not functioning that evening, and investigators could not verify the report. The investigation also focused on Michael's family background and social connections, standard procedure in missing child cases. Robert and Susan Thompson were interviewed extensively about their relationships, financial situation, and any potential sources of conflict that might have led to Michael's abduction. The background investigation revealed that the Thompson family had no significant debts, legal problems, or personal conflicts that might have motivated someone to target Michael. Robert Thompson's employment history was stable, and Susan had no history of mental health issues or substance abuse. The family appeared to be loving and stable, with no indicators of domestic violence or child abuse. However, investigators did discover that Susan Thompson had been adopted as a child and had recently been attempting to locate her biological parents. This search had involved contact with various adoption agencies and private investigators, raising the possibility that someone from Susan's past might have targeted Michael. However, this line of investigation did not produce any concrete leads. As June ended, the investigation had generated over 500 tips and had involved interviews with more than 200 individuals. Despite the extensive effort, no substantial progress had been made in determining Michael's whereabouts or identifying his abductor. The case was beginning to show signs of becoming a long-term investigation. The Thompson family was struggling to cope with the uncertainty and media attention. They had been forced to take leave from their jobs and had moved in with Susan's adoptive parents to escape the constant presence of reporters and curious neighbors. The stress was taking a toll on their marriage and their ability to function normally. The FBI team was preparing to scale back its on-site presence, though the investigation would continue with local resources. Agent Chen had developed a profile of the likely abductor, suggesting that the perpetrator was probably a male between 25 and 45 years old who had experience with children and had planned the abduction in advance. The investigation was about to enter a new phase, focusing on long-term strategies for locating Michael and identifying his abductor. However, the breakthrough would not come from traditional investigative techniques, but from an unexpected source that would surface 3 years later in the most unlikely of circumstances. Chapter 3: Expanding the Net. As summer turned to autumn in 1994, the Michael Thompson investigation had evolved into one of the most extensive missing child cases in Oregon's history. Detective Morrison had been assigned to work the case full-time, coordinating with federal agents and managing a task force that included investigators from multiple jurisdictions. The investigation had expanded to include a comprehensive analysis of similar cases throughout the Pacific Northwest. FBI behavioral analysts had identified patterns suggesting that Michael's abduction might be connected to other unsolved cases involving young children who had disappeared from public places under similar circumstances. Special Agent Chun had developed a detailed psychological profile of the suspected abductor. The profile suggested that the perpetrator was likely a white male between 30 and 50 years old, with above-average intelligence and the ability to blend into social situations. The careful planning evident in Michael's abduction indicated that the perpetrator had probably observed the birthday party in advance and had waited for an opportunity to approach Michael when he was isolated from the group. The investigation revealed that 3 other children had disappeared from public places in Oregon and Washington during the previous 2 years. While the cases had not been previously connected, the FBI analysis identified similarities in the methods of abduction and the profiles of the victims. All 4 children were between 6 and 9 years old, had blonde or light brown hair, and had disappeared during afternoon hours from crowded public areas. The first similar case involved 7-year-old Jennifer Walsh, who had vanished from a shopping mall in Seattle in October 1992. Jennifer had been separated from her mother for approximately 10 minutes while shopping for school clothes. Despite extensive searches and investigations, no trace of Jennifer had ever been found. The second case was that of 9-year-old Timothy Rodriguez, who had disappeared from a youth soccer game in Eugene, Oregon, in March 1993. Timothy had left the sidelines to retrieve a ball that had been kicked out of bounds and had never returned. His disappearance had occurred in front of dozens of witnesses, yet no one had seen him leave the area. The third case involved 6-year-old Amanda Chen, who had vanished from a community festival in Tacoma, Washington, in September 1993. Amanda had been attending the festival with her grandparents and had disappeared while they were watching a stage performance. Like the other cases, no witnesses had seen Amanda leave with anyone, and no evidence of her fate had been discovered. The connection between these cases prompted the creation of a regional task force dedicated to investigating what appeared to be a serial child abduction pattern. The task force included investigators from the FBI, Portland Police Bureau, Seattle Police Department, Eugene Police Department, and Tacoma Police Department. The task force analysis revealed additional disturbing patterns. All 4 children had disappeared during weekend events when many families were present. The abductions had occurred during peak activity periods when parents and supervisors were distracted by performances, games, or other entertainment. The perpetrator appeared to have an understanding of child behavior and crowd dynamics. Detective Morrison traveled to Seattle, Eugene, and Tacoma to review the physical evidence and witness statements from the previous cases. He found that the investigation techniques and evidence collection procedures had been similar across all jurisdictions, but no physical evidence had been recovered that could definitively link the cases. However, the review did reveal some previously overlooked connections. In each case, witnesses had reported seeing unfamiliar adults with cameras in the vicinity of the children before their disappearances. While this observation had been noted in individual case files, the pattern had not been recognized until the cases were analyzed together. The camera sightings were particularly significant because they suggested that the perpetrator might be documenting his activities or conducting surveillance of potential victims. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit indicated that such documentation was consistent with organized predatory behavior and suggested that the perpetrator might be keeping records or trophies of his crimes. The investigation expanded to include photo processing centers and camera stores throughout the region. Investigators hoped to identify individuals who might be developing large quantities of photographs of children, or who might be purchasing specialized camera equipment suitable for surveillance activities. This line of investigation proved challenging due to the advent of digital photography and the increasing use of one-hour photo processing services. Many photographers were developing their own film or using automated processing services that did not require human review of the images. The investigation required the cooperation of dozens of businesses and the review of thousands of customer records. One potentially significant lead emerged from a camera store in downtown Portland. The store's owner, Harold Kim, reported that a man had been purchasing large quantities of film and camera supplies over the past year. The man, who paid in cash and gave the name David Johnson, had been particularly interested in telephoto lenses and equipment suitable for photographing subjects from a distance. Kim's description of David Johnson matched the general profile developed by FBI analysts: a white male in his 40s, approximately 6 feet tall, with brown hair and an average build. However, the description was too general to be useful for identification purposes, and the name was likely fictitious. The investigation into David Johnson revealed that he had also made purchases at camera stores in Seattle and Eugene, using the same false name and paying in cash. The purchases had been made during time periods that coincided with the disappearances of Jennifer Walsh and Timothy Rodriguez, suggesting a possible connection to the serial abduction pattern. Store employees from all three cities provided similar descriptions of David Johnson, though none could provide sufficient detail for a composite sketch. The man had been described as polite and knowledgeable about photography, suggesting that he had genuine expertise with camera equipment. The task force issued a regional alert asking for information about anyone matching David Johnson's description who had been observed taking photographs of children at public events. The alert was distributed to law enforcement agencies, school districts, and community organizations throughout Oregon and Washington. The alert generated dozens of responses from the public, but most proved to be cases of mistaken identity or concerned reports about legitimate photographers. However, one report from an elementary school principal in Beaverton, Oregon, described a man who had been observed photographing children during recess periods at multiple schools in the district. The Beaverton investigation revealed that the man had been visiting different elementary schools over a period of several months, positioning himself on public property adjacent to playgrounds and photographing children during outdoor activities. When confronted by school personnel, he had claimed to be a freelance photographer documenting childhood activities for a magazine article. However, the man's behavior had been suspicious enough that several schools had reported him to local police. The reports described him as a white male in his 40s, driving a light-colored sedan and carrying professional camera equipment. The description was consistent with the David Johnson sightings from the camera stores. The Beaverton Police Department had assigned Officer Michael Santos to investigate the photographer reports. Santos had attempted to locate the man on several occasions but had been unsuccessful. The man appeared to visit each school only once or twice before moving on to different locations, making it difficult to predict his movements. The investigation revealed that similar photographer reports had been made by schools in multiple jurisdictions throughout the Portland metropolitan area. The pattern suggested that someone was conducting systematic surveillance of children in educational settings, behavior that was consistent with predatory activity. The task force coordinated with school districts throughout the region to implement enhanced security measures and reporting procedures. Teachers and administrators were instructed to immediately report any unauthorized photography of children, and protocols were established for rapid law enforcement response to such incidents. As 1994 ended, the investigation had identified a potential suspect pattern but had not succeeded in locating the perpetrator or any of the missing children. The task force had been expanded to include investigators from California and Idaho, as reports of similar activities had been received from those states. The Thompson family had been kept informed of all developments in the investigation, though the expanding scope of the case had brought both hope and additional anguish. The possibility that Michael's disappearance was part of a larger pattern suggested that significant resources were being devoted to finding him, but it also implied that his abductor was experienced and organized. The investigation was about to enter its second year, with no resolution in sight. However, the groundwork being laid by the task force would prove crucial when the breakthrough finally came, not through traditional investigative methods, but through the sharp eyes of a professional photographer who would spot something that everyone else had missed. Chapter 4. The Case Grows Cold. By June 1995, 1 year after Michael Thompson's disappearance, the regional task force had investigated over 1,200 tips and interviewed more than 400 potential suspects. Despite the extensive effort, none of the 4 missing children had been found, and no arrests had been made in connection with the suspected serial abduction pattern. Detective Morrison had been promoted to sergeant and was now supervising other detectives while continuing to coordinate the Thompson investigation. The case had become a defining challenge of his career, and he had developed an encyclopedic knowledge of every detail, witness statement, and piece of evidence collected during the 12-month investigation. The FBI's involvement had been scaled back as other priorities demanded attention, though Special Agent Chen continued to monitor the case and provide consultation when new leads emerged. The behavioral profile had been refined multiple times, but no definitive identification of a suspect had been achieved. The Thompson family had struggled through the first anniversary of Michael's disappearance. They had held a memorial service at Riverside Park, attended by family members, friends, and many of the original party guests. The service had been covered by local media, generating renewed public interest and several new tips, though none proved to be significant. Robert Thompson had returned to work at the auto repair shop, finding that routine mechanical tasks provided some distraction from his grief. However, colleagues noted that he had become withdrawn and rarely spoke about anything other than work-related matters. Susan Thompson had been unable to return to her job as a dental hygienist, finding it too difficult to interact with children and families. The couple had established the Michael Thompson Foundation to support families of missing children and to advocate for improved law enforcement procedures. The foundation had raised over $50,000 by the end of 1995, providing assistance to 12 other families dealing with similar situations. The investigation had revealed significant gaps in coordination between law enforcement agencies when dealing with multi-jurisdictional cases. The Thompson case had led to improved protocols for sharing information and resources across state and local boundaries. These improvements had aided in the resolution of several other missing person cases, though they had not helped locate Michael. In September 1995, the investigation received renewed attention when a child's remains were discovered in a wooded area near Mount Hood, approximately 60 miles east of Portland. The discovery generated significant media coverage and raised hopes that one of the missing children might finally be found. However, forensic analysis revealed that the remains belonged to a different child entirely. The remains were eventually identified as those of a runaway teenager who had died of exposure during the previous winter. The discovery led to closure for another family but provided no information about Michael or the other missing children. The false hope generated by the Mount Hood discovery was particularly difficult for all four families. The Thompson family had traveled to the site and had waited for forensic results, experiencing an emotional roller coaster that left them drained and discouraged. Similar experiences had occurred multiple times during the investigation, as various discoveries had raised and dashed hopes. By 1996, the active investigation had been suspended, though the cases remained open and were reviewed periodically. The task force had been disbanded, with individual jurisdictions maintaining responsibility for their respective cases while continuing to share information through regional networks. Detective Morrison had been assigned to other cases but continued to review the Thompson file monthly. He had developed personal relationships with all four families and felt a deep responsibility to continue seeking answers. The case had taught him valuable lessons about the limitations of traditional investigative techniques and the importance of long-term persistence. The investigation had generated a comprehensive database of information about child predators, missing children, and suspicious activities throughout the Pacific Northwest. This database had become a valuable resource for other investigations and had contributed to the resolution of several unrelated cases. The Thompson case had also influenced changes in how children's events were organized and supervised. Many parks and recreation departments had implemented enhanced security measures, including improved communication systems and standardized procedures for reporting missing children. These changes had prevented several potential incidents, though they could not undo what had already happened. In 1997, 3 years after Michael's disappearance, the case received national attention when it was featured on the television program America's Most Wanted. The program included interviews with the Thompson family and Detective Morrison, along with detailed information about the suspected serial abduction pattern. The broadcast generated over 400 new tips from viewers across the country, requiring several weeks of follow-up investigation. Most of the tips proved to be cases of mistaken identity or unrelated sightings, but the attention helped maintain public awareness of the case. One tip from the broadcast seemed particularly promising. A viewer in Phoenix, Arizona, reported seeing a boy who resembled Michael at a shopping mall. The viewer, Margaret Chen, was a retired school teacher who had experience working with children and was confident in her identification. She reported that the boy had been with a man who appeared to be his father, but something about their interaction had seemed unusual. Detective Morrison traveled to Phoenix to investigate Chen's report, but the follow-up investigation was unsuccessful. Security camera footage from the mall was inconclusive, and no one else reported seeing the boy or the man Chen had described. The lead was eventually classified as unsubstantiated, though it remained in the active file. The Phoenix investigation had been typical of many leads generated by the case. Initial reports often seemed promising, but detailed follow-up usually revealed that the sightings were either mistaken identities or coincidental resemblances. The emotional toll of these false leads had been significant for both the families and the investigators. As 1997 ended, it seemed increasingly likely that the Thompson case would remain unsolved permanently. The families had learned to live with uncertainty, though they continued to hope for answers. Support groups had been established to help them cope with the long-term stress of having missing children. The case had become part of law enforcement training programs throughout Oregon, cited as an example of the challenges involved in investigating complex missing person cases. The investigation had demonstrated both the importance of interagency cooperation and the limitations of traditional investigative techniques when dealing with organized predators. Detective Morrison had been promoted to lieutenant and was now supervising the entire detective division. Despite his increased responsibilities, he continued to review the Thompson case file quarterly, looking for connections or patterns that might have been missed during the initial investigation. The case had affected Morrison deeply, influencing his approach to all missing person investigations. He had become an advocate for improved resources and training for investigators dealing with child abduction cases, speaking at conferences and contributing to professional publications on the subject. As 1997 drew to a close, the investigation had been dormant for over a year. The families had accepted that they might never learn what had happened to their children, though they continued to hope for a miracle. That miracle was about to come from an unexpected source, a freelance photographer reviewing family photos who would notice something that had been hiding in plain sight for 3 years. Chapter 5. The Photograph That Changed Everything. March 22, 1997. 3 years, 9 months, and 4 days after Michael Thompson vanished from his birthday party, freelance photographer David Martinez was conducting what he expected to be a routine review of family photographs for a client in downtown Portland. Martinez specialized in photo restoration and enhancement services, helping families preserve and improve their cherished memories. Martinez had established his business, Lasting Images Photography Services, in 1994, operating from a small studio in the Pearl District. His clientele consisted primarily of families seeking to restore damaged photographs or to enhance the quality of important images. The work required meticulous attention to detail and extensive knowledge of photographic techniques and digital enhancement software. The client who had brought photographs to Martinez that day was Eleanor Patterson, a 67-year-old retired librarian who was preparing a family history album for her upcoming 50th wedding anniversary. Patterson had collected hundreds of photographs spanning 5 decades of family events, including weddings, graduations, holidays, and vacation trips. Among the photographs was a collection from a family reunion that had taken place at Laurelhurst Park in Portland on July 4, 1994. The reunion had brought together over 40 members of the Patterson extended family for a day of picnicking, games, and socializing. Eleanor's son, James Patterson, had taken numerous photographs throughout the day to document the celebration. Martinez was examining the reunion photographs under magnification to identify potential improvements when he noticed something unusual in the background of one image. The photograph showed the Patterson family gathered around a picnic table for a group meal, but behind them, barely visible among the trees, was a smaller group that appeared to include a man and a young boy. The image quality was poor due to the distance and lighting conditions, but something about the boy's appearance caught Martinez's attention. The child appeared to have light-colored hair and was wearing what looked like a red shirt. Martinez had been following the Michael Thompson case through media coverage and immediately thought of the missing boy. Martinez used his digital enhancement equipment to isolate and magnify the background figures. While the image remained grainy and indistinct, the enhanced version revealed more details about the man and boy. The child appeared to be approximately the right age and size to be Michael Thompson, and his hair color seemed consistent with the missing boy's description. However, Martinez realized that his observations were highly speculative. The image quality was too poor to make a definitive identification, and there could be many innocent explanations for the presence of a man and boy in the park on July 4th. Nonetheless, he felt obligated to report his observations to law enforcement. Martinez contacted the Portland Police Bureau on March 23 and requested to speak with Detective Morrison about the Thompson case. Morrison, now a lieutenant but still involved in reviewing cold cases, agreed to meet with Martinez at his studio to examine the photographs. When Morrison saw the enhanced images, he was immediately intrigued by the possibility that they might show Michael Thompson. However, he also recognized the limitations of the evidence. The image quality was insufficient for positive identification, and the presence of a man and boy in a Portland park could easily be explained by innocent circumstances. Nevertheless, Morrison decided to pursue the leads systematically. He arranged for the FBI's Image Analysis Unit to examine the photographs using more sophisticated enhancement techniques. He also requested that Eleanor Patterson be interviewed about the circumstances surrounding the family reunion and whether she had noticed the background figures at the time. The interview with Eleanor Patterson on March 25 revealed that she had not noticed the man and boy in the background when the photographs were originally taken. The Patterson family had been focused on their own celebration and had not paid attention to other park visitors. Eleanor estimated that the photographs had been taken between 2 p.m. and 3 p.m. on July 4, 1994. The FBI's enhanced analysis of the photographs, completed on March 30th, provided some additional details but could not definitively identify the subjects. The technical analysts concluded that the boy appeared to be between 6 and 10 years old and had light-colored hair, characteristics consistent with Michael Thompson. However, the image quality remained insufficient for positive identification. Morrison decided to expand the investigation by reviewing all available records from Laurelhurst Park for July 4, 1994. The park's administrative offices had records of permitted events and activities, though they did not maintain comprehensive visitor logs. However, the investigation revealed that several large family gatherings had taken place in the park that day. The investigation also included a canvass of families who had been in Laurelhurst Park on July 4, 1994. Morrison hoped to locate other families who might have taken photographs that included the same background area, potentially providing additional angles or clearer images of the mysterious man and boy. The canvass effort was extensive, involving contact with dozens of families who had obtained permits for July 4th gatherings at various Portland parks. Morrison's team also placed advertisements in local newspapers, requesting that anyone who had taken photographs at Laurelhurst Park on July 4, 1994, contact the police department. The response was overwhelming, with over 60 families providing photographs from that day. Morrison and his team spent weeks reviewing hundreds of images, looking for any additional views of the man and boy who had appeared in the Patterson family photograph. The process was tedious and often disappointing, as most photographs showed only the families who had taken them. However, on April 15, 1997, the investigation achieved a breakthrough. The Rodriguez family, who had held their own reunion at Laurelhurst Park that day, provided a photograph that showed the same man and boy from a different angle. This image, taken by Maria Rodriguez around 2:30 p.m., was clearer and showed more detail of both subjects. The enhanced analysis of the Rodriguez photograph revealed significant new information. The boy appeared to be wearing a red shirt with a logo that could potentially be identified. More importantly, the image showed that the boy seemed reluctant or resistant, with body language suggesting he did not want to be where he was. The man appeared to be holding the boy's hand firmly, possibly restraining him. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit reviewed both photographs and concluded that the interaction between the man and boy appeared coercive rather than familial. The boy's posture and facial expression, while still not clearly visible, suggested distress or unwillingness to cooperate with the adult. Based on this analysis, Morrison decided to treat the photographs as potential evidence of Michael Thompson's abduction. The investigation was reactivated with full resources, and the FBI's Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team was again contacted for assistance. The reactivated investigation focused intensively on identifying the man in the photographs. While his face was not clearly visible, the images provided enough detail to estimate his height, build, and general appearance. The man appeared to be approximately 6 feet tall, with a medium build and dark hair. He was wearing dark clothing and appeared to be in his 30s or 40s. The investigation team compared the photographic evidence with the descriptions provided by witnesses in the original Thompson case and the other suspected serial abductions. The general physical characteristics were consistent with previous witness accounts of suspicious individuals observed near missing children. Morrison coordinated with the other jurisdictions involved in the suspected serial cases to determine if any similar photographic evidence existed from those locations. While no photographs were immediately available, the investigation prompted renewed canvassing efforts in Seattle, Eugene, and Tacoma. The breakthrough came on April 28 when the Seattle Police Department reported that they had located a witness who had taken photographs at the mall where Jennifer Walsh had disappeared in 1992. The witness, amateur photographer Robert Kim, had been documenting architectural features of the mall for a college project and had inadvertently captured background images of shoppers. Kim's photographs, when enhanced and analyzed, showed a man with a young girl in the background of one image. The man's physical characteristics appeared consistent with the figure in the Portland Park photographs. While the girl's face was not visible, her general appearance and the timing of the photograph made it possible that she was Jennifer Walsh. The discovery of potential photographic evidence from two different cases provided strong support for the theory that the same perpetrator was responsible for multiple abductions. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit concluded that the evidence was sufficient to justify treating the cases as definitively linked. The investigation expanded to include a comprehensive review of all available photographic evidence from public events throughout the Pacific Northwest during the relevant time period. Law enforcement agencies issued appeals for photographs taken at festivals, parks, malls, and other public gatherings where children might have been present. The response was extraordinary, with thousands of photographs submitted for analysis. The task of reviewing this material required the creation of a dedicated team of analysts who worked systematically through the images, looking for any appearances of the suspected perpetrator or missing children. On May 15, 1997, the investigation achieved another significant breakthrough. A family from Eugene provided photographs from a youth soccer tournament that had taken place in March 1993. The same event where Timothy Rodriguez had disappeared. The photographs showed a man matching the suspect's description standing near the edge of the playing field, apparently watching the game. Most significantly, one photograph appeared to show the same man walking away from the field with a young boy who could potentially be Timothy Rodriguez. The image was taken approximately 30 minutes after Timothy was reported missing, providing a possible timeline for his abduction. The accumulation of photographic evidence from multiple jurisdictions provided investigators with their strongest leads in the 3-year investigation. While individual images remained inconclusive, the pattern of appearances at different locations where children had disappeared was highly significant. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit developed an updated profile based on the photographic evidence. The suspect appeared to be an organized predator who targeted children at public events where he could blend into crowds. His ability to approach children without arousing suspicion suggested that he was skilled at appearing trustworthy and non-threatening. The investigation revealed that the suspect appeared to have a systematic approach to selecting victims and opportunities. The photographic evidence suggested that he conducted surveillance of potential targets before acting, positioning himself strategically at events where children were present and supervision might be less than optimal. On June 1, 1997, law enforcement agencies throughout the region issued a coordinated public appeal for information about the suspect. The appeal included composite sketches based on the photographic evidence and requested that anyone who recognized the individual contact police immediately. The public response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 24 hours, the tip hotline had received over 200 calls from individuals who believed they had seen the suspect or knew someone who matched his description. Each tip required careful evaluation and follow-up investigation. One tip proved to be particularly significant. A caller from Beaverton identified the suspect as possibly being William Marcus Thompson, a 42-year-old man who worked as a freelance photographer and lived alone in a suburban apartment complex. The caller, Thompson's former neighbor, had been disturbed by his behavior around children and his obsessive interest in photography. The investigation into William Thompson revealed that he matched the physical description derived from the photographic evidence. More significantly, his background check revealed that he had been questioned in 1991 about taking unauthorized photographs of children at schools, though no charges had been filed. Thompson's employment records showed that he had been working as a freelance photographer throughout the period when the children had disappeared. His assignments had taken him to various locations throughout Oregon and Washington, providing him with legitimate reasons to be present at public events where children were gathered. On June 18, 1997, exactly 3 years after Michael Thompson's disappearance, detectives obtained a warrant to search William Thompson's apartment. The search revealed an extensive collection of photographs of children, including images that appear to have been taken without the subject's knowledge at parks, schools, and public events. More importantly, the search uncovered what appeared to be a hidden room behind a false wall in Thompson's apartment. The room contained additional photographic equipment and what investigators would later describe as a trophy collection of items that appeared to have belonged to missing children. Among the items found in the hidden room was a red Pokémon t-shirt that matched the description of the shirt Michael Thompson had been wearing when he disappeared. DNA analysis would later confirm that the shirt had belonged to Michael, providing the definitive evidence that investigators had been seeking for 3 years. William Thompson was arrested at his apartment on June 18 and charged with multiple counts of kidnapping and murder. During questioning, he eventually confessed to the abductions of all 4 children, providing details that only the perpetrator could have known. Thompson led investigators to locations where he had buried the children's remains, finally providing closure for the 4 families who had endured years of uncertainty. Michael Thompson was found in a wooded area near the Oregon coast, approximately 80 miles west of Portland. The investigation had been solved not through traditional detective work, but through the observant eye of a photographer who had noticed something that everyone else had missed. David Martinez's careful attention to detail and willingness to report his observations had been the key to resolving one of the most complex serial abduction cases in Pacific Northwest history. The Thompson family finally had the answers they had been seeking, though the knowledge brought both closure and renewed grief. The memorial service for Michael was held at Riverside Park, the same location where his birthday party had ended in tragedy 3 years earlier. The case became a landmark in law enforcement training, demonstrating the importance of photographic evidence and the value of public participation in investigations. The techniques developed during the investigation were adopted by police departments throughout the country and contributed to the resolution of numerous other cases. David Martinez was recognized for his contribution to the investigation and continued his work helping families preserve their memories. However, he would always remember the case that had shown him how photographs could serve not just as keepsakes, but as instruments of justice. The investigation had taken 3 years to solve, but it had ultimately provided answers and justice for 4 families whose children had been taken from them. Michael Thompson's face, captured accidentally in the background of a family photograph, had finally led investigators to the truth they had been seeking.